If you follow me on social media, you might have seen that my father-in-law has been building a beautiful screened-in porch out of western red cedar over the past few years. When my father-in-law's brother recently passed away unexpectedly, my father-in-law mentioned a few times that his brother would have really loved the porch. His brother was a man of many talents, most notably building things with his hands, and it's a talent that seems to run on that side of the family. My wife had the idea that some sort of sign dedicating the porch to Tim's memory would be a cherished gift, and when I recently got my CNC, I knew it would be the perfect tool for making this gift. This was my first real project on the CNC and served as a great introduction to the process. To start, I picked out a really nice piece of walnut and milled it square 4 sides. My CNC is a Shapeoko XL, and I used the bundled software Carbide Create to design the CAD and CAM processes for the build. The text was a simple V-carve operation, and I used a 45-degree white side router bit. The family are also avid hikers and love the outdoors, so my goal was to give this sign the feel of a trail sign you might see when out hiking. For the shape of the sign, I came up with a basic pentagon, again trying to mimic a trail sign, and cut the shape with a 1/4-inch end mill. Since I hadn't added a sacrificial spoil board to the bed of my CNC, I left about 1/8 of an inch remaining on the bottom of the cut. Once the operation had finished, I cut the sign from the excess wood using a small saw, and then cleaned up the edge using a template bit on the router table. With the edges flush, I added a slight chamfer to all the edges of the sign. I wanted the letters of the sign to be white so that they would stand out nicely against the walnut. To do this, I first sprayed a few coats of spray shellac on the sign, then added 3 coats of white spray paint on top of that. The spray shellac base really helps to keep the grain in the face of the sign from absorbing too much extra paint, which would just have to be sanded away later. Once the paint had dried for 24 hours, I sanded the sign with 80 grit sandpaper to remove the excess paint, and this left me with really nice, clean, crisp lettering. After removing the excess paint, I drilled countersunk holes at each corner for mounting the sign. Another great option here would be to cut a keyhole slot with a keyhole slot router bit. With the holes drilled, I sanded the sign with 120 grit and then 180 grit sandpaper, and then wiped the surface clean with a damp rag to prep for finish. For finish, I decided to use a spar urethane since this sign will be outdoors. I applied the finish with a foam brush, and when I added the first coat, I was a little disappointed to see that excess finish was pooling up in the letters. If I were to do this again, I would use a spray finish instead so that the finish would be more even. I applied 3 total coats, sanding with 320 grit sandpaper in between coats. This sign was a Christmas gift for my father-in-law. It was also one of the most rewarding things I've made, even though it was something so simple. Being able to make something that will be cherished for years to come is one of the greatest aspects of woodworking, in my opinion. Giving this gift was a little bittersweet, as I know it brought up a lot of emotions related to his brother's passing, but I also think it was a perfectly fitting memento in remembrance of Tim. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this simple build, and I'll see you next Tuesday for another project.